Hello, friends. This is Dave Hurwitz, executive editor at ClassicsToday.com, here with an absolutely splendid disc of Prokofiev's Violin Concertos. And I find Prokofiev's Violin Concertos to be really, really interesting. Not just because they're popular, they're wonderful to listen to, but because he wrote them at all. You may recall I did a little chat on composers who wrote only 2 violin concertos, and asked the question of whether or not they were fraternal twins or identical twins. That is, if they show the composer's evolution in style. And Prokofiev's are without question fraternal twins, the first being an early-ish work in that style from the same time as like The Love for Three Oranges in the 1920s, and the second one being very much in the Romeo and Juliet wrong note romanticism lyrical style that he adopted after his return to the Soviet Union. Now, I'm not sure if the dates are all work out that way, but that's how they are musically. I'm not going to make an issue of dates of composition and things like that. They partake of those elements of his style. And Prokofiev was a pianist. I mean, a serious pianist. I mean, a virtuoso pianist of his own, and he wrote piano music, piano sonatas, 5 piano concertos. It really is I think, evidence of his extraordinary genius as a composer that he wrote not 1, but 2 violin concertos, because violin concertos are just a beast. I've said this over and over and over again. They're extremely difficult to write because, first of all, you have to find violin virtuosi who are willing to play them. And violin virtuosi are hard people to deal with. They are much more persnickety than pianists are. Pianists are sort of easygoing. There's lots of wonderful piano repertoire, and they're more than willing to take a crack at it most of the time. And most composers are pianists, so they naturally write for the piano. It's not such a big deal, But Prokofiev was a pianist, and his music is piano music. I mean, he wrote at the piano. He's I have a friend who was a harpist, and we were playing some Prokofiev in my community orchestra, and I said to her, "They're really piano parts, aren't they?" And she's like, "Yeah," because she also plays the piano, as many harpists do. And she said, it's a piano part, and you just said to the harp, "Play that." And that's true of a lot of his writing. It's very pianistic. But these 2 violin concertos are wonderful works for the violin. There were wonderful Russian violinists who were willing to play them and who presumably gave him a few pointers when he needed them on how to make sure that the solo parts were idiomatic. And boy, oh boy, he wrote 2 great violin concertos. I think that they're a little bit underrated. I think Prokofiev generally is a little bit underrated because people find his style to be somewhat facile and maybe a little wanting in emotional depth. But no one seems to have that issue with these violin concertos, and I've seen them live many times, and they're both beautiful crowd pleasers. The second more than the first because it's in a more traditional idiom, but they are both extraordinary. And most of the great violinists in the universe have done one or the other, number 1 or number 2, and some have done both. But for these faves, I have many recordings of each of them, and in boxes and separately and all kinds of things. But I wanted to choose an album that has both of them that I really love because it's just convenient and a great way, for collecting purposes. I mean, and I know. Let me tell you a secret. Let's talk tachlis, folks. You know this as well as I do. We only have a limited amount of space. We only have a limited amount of time. When I was moving to this apartment, for example, you've all seen the videos I make in the overflow room. I had to make choices. And one of those choices was if I can get a disc that has both violin concertos instead of 2 discs having 1 each, I'm taking that one with me, and the others are going into the overflow room because all things being equal, the performances are just as good. They're just as marvelous, and it saves space. So that's how this album wound up here. And I've never regretted it because I've only enjoyed it more and more as time goes on. And it is this one. Here it is. It's Cho-Liang Lin with the Los Angeles Philharmonic and Esa-Pekka Salonen conducting. I mean, Salonen is such a great contemporary music conductor because he's so precise and so clean and so clear and so sensitive to what the soloist wants to do. And the LA Phil, these records that they made together sounded just marvelous. I mean, that was one of those golden age things, the box of Salonen Los Angeles stuff is just amazing, and all of his Sony recordings actually, they're really really terrific. But the Los Angeles stuff is particularly good. So, and it was in the days when major labels paid real money to make real records, and this is one of them. And Cho-Liang Lin is such a fine pianist. He did that amazing Nielsen and Sibelius disc, which is also with Salonen. Just a terrific violinist who doesn't get, I think, quite as much play as he deserves to. And the wonderful thing about this album, which I think is even more wonderful, is that it also contains the Stravinsky Violin Concerto in a stunning performance, a fabulous performance, which makes it even more space-saving. It's amazing. It's wonderful. Actually, I have some more of the Stravinsky sitting around because Stravinsky was a one violin concerto guy. And so, it's coupled with all kinds of other things. So you wind up with extra ones sitting around. But this is definitely one of the best because not only is the performance marvelous, but the program, the Russian violin concerto thing, makes so much sense. And the Stravinsky is so different from Prokofiev and stylistically, which means you've got three very nicely varied violin concerti, two in Prokofiev's different styles and one Stravinsky. And it's just a fabulous 20th century violin concerto album with wonderful playing, wonderful sound, wonderful conducting, and what more can you ask? I know we will all have our other favorites. I mean, Heifetz did the second, and there's what's his name, did the first. Everybody did the first. Oistrakh, and famous historical recordings, and there's no shortage of recordings of either of these works, but this is as good a disc as any of them, and it's definitely one of my faves, both for logistical and musical artistic reasons. So keep on listening, friends. Thanks so much for joining me. Take care.